We all have made mistakes in the past in leadership positions, but what if your mistake cost the lives of thousands of people? During World War in 1915, Winston Churchill made a number of failures throughout his career. But one of the biggest failures was when he was appointed the First Lord of the Admiralty. In 1915, he requested that Britain send naval and ground forces to take control of a strategic strait near the Gallipoli Peninsula known as the Dardanelles. British control of the Dardanelles would have given them access to the only waterway between the Mediterranean Sea in the west and the Black Sea in the east. If the British had control over the strait, it would have opened a direct channel to Russia to facilitate moving Russian armies. Churchill was responsible for the operation, but did not have the authority to make the decision that he thought were necessary for a successful mission. Forces eventually attacked the Dardanelles, leading to thousands of Allied casualties and the destruction of very important ships. After the disaster, Churchill recognized his failure. He was trying to achieve a great enterprise without having the plenary authority, which could so easily have carried this to success. Churchill eventually learned from the Dardanelles catastrophe and used that experience when making key decisions during World War II. During World War II, Churchill did not appoint a defense minister, so he could have the appropriate authority over strategic maneuvers during the war. Ultimately, this unilateral decision made him win the war. At one point, his political opponents tried to use the disaster of Gallipoli against him. When he was running for parliament in 1923, hecklers even called out to him, "What about the Dardanelles?" But the British bulldog embraced Gallipoli as a brilliant failure and said, "The Dardanelles might have saved millions of lives. Don't imagine I'm running away from it. I glory in it." Hi guys, welcome back to another episode. My name is Lauren Maluhi and welcome to In Harmony, giving you light and encouragement to pursue the incredible life that God has for you. So why did we bring up this Winston Churchill story? After hearing about that major loss, it's pretty safe to say that leadership is not a piece of cake. Having an impact is not an easy task, and it's definitely not for everybody. What we can learn from the story is that we don't have to be perfect like Jesus Christ in order to be a leader in our lives and in order to have a big impact on not just our lives, but the lives of others. What we can learn from Winston Churchill's major failure is that leaders have to have the ability to bounce back from mistakes because you and I are human and we definitely are going to make them. And something that sets leaders apart from other people in a community, a team, an enterprise is that they don't just point out the problem, they provide solutions. There is never going to be a shortage of people in our professional settings, in our family settings, in our friendships, in whatever we're trying to do. There's never going to be a shortage of people who will point out problems. Problems are not hard to identify, which is why most people will say, "Oh, it's just that the problem is that we live in the city. Oh, it's just the problem is that we don't have a big enough budget. Oh, it's just the problem is that this building isn't new." There is never going to be a shortage of people who do that, and I'm sure you can relate to this. But what you and I need to do in order to be strong leaders in whatever position we find ourselves in is not point out the problem, but provide solutions. So you and I, in order to have an impact, need to be problem solvers and doers. One of the things that a leader does that is very much in short supply, and I'm sure you can relate to this, is that they follow through with their word. Their yes is yes and their no is no. If they say they're going to do something, maybe it doesn't happen right away. Maybe it takes a couple of days, but they follow through and they do it. One example that recently happened to me, and he is probably going to think it's insignificant, but to me it had a big impact, and now it's something that I always think about that I want to be for another person. So this is actually a story of one of my friends. His name is Roberto, and he's in my he's in a leadership class that I take at church, and he's also a circle leader. And he's one of my very good friends. He's awesome. And he's also the host of the God-Fearing podcast, which is an awesome podcast that I highly recommend that you guys check out. And the other day he was telling me, oh my gosh, like I'm so excited to start listening to your podcast. And I didn't want to make a big deal about it. I was like, oh yeah, if you check it out, let me know what you think. Like I'm really open to what I can do better. And he was like, yes, I'm going to check it out. And I was like, oh, okay. And I didn't really, I just kind of didn't think about it. Because a lot of times people will say, oh, let's get coffee, let's do this. And they never actually, it never actually goes through. And that's okay. That's just how I think our generation typically is. And so he had texted me, I want to say a couple of days later, and he's like, Lauren, I saw the podcast. This is my feedback. I really liked this. Work on this. And he actually gave me feedback on something that he said he was going to do. And I remember finding that really impressive because he's a young guy. It's not like he's an older man. And he said he was going to do something. And even though it was something like so small, and some people would even say insignificant because it wasn't in a professional setting, even though it took him some time, he still followed through and did it. And I remember finding that really impressive. And I was like, that is what a leader does, is they don't just say things like, oh, let's do this, or I'll do this, and they don't actually do it. They say something and they follow through with it. And a tip in doing something like that is leaders also write things down. That is so rare to see a lot of times in our professional settings, are people who write things down. But leaders know that in order to be excellent in their crafts, they can't remember everything that they have to do, or they can't remember every idea that they have. So a tip in order to follow through on your word is to write things down. And like Roberto, let your yes be yes and your no mean no. Don't just say anything, because if you don't value and follow through with your word, other people aren't going to respect you or value your word. But even worse than that, you're not going to respect yourself, because you know that your word has no value and your mind is paying attention. Your mind is listening to, okay, we're somebody who doesn't follow through with our word. It's hard to respect yourself when you're not a man or woman of your word. So make sure to be like that in professional and unprofessional settings in order to be a standout leader. The coolest thing about being a leader is that it doesn't matter on your title or position. You could be a leader in whatever setting you're in. Maybe you're the coach of a U6 soccer team. Maybe you're a player on a football team. Maybe you're an intern at a church internship. Whatever the case may be, you don't have to be the CEO of a company to be a leader. You can make yourself a leader no matter the position. Influence makes you a leader, not your job title. Leaders have the ability to impact lives. When you and I die from this earth, our body's no longer going to be here. But something that's going to stay on this earth for generations and generations and generations after we're gone is the impact that we have on people's lives. If you give somebody an encouraging word, if you substantially create a difference in somebody's life, that is not just going to stick with them, but that might be an impact that they teach to their kids and their kids' kids and their kids' kids. So never underestimate the importance of being a leader, because the impact that you create, more than money, more than assets, more than anything you leave on this earth, that impact is the most valuable legacy that you can leave behind. One of the most, if not the most important quality of a leader is this idea that how can I serve others versus how can I gain? If you have that heart position, that is where the true impact comes. I was really sitting with that thought, and one of the first people that came to my mind were my pastors. They're leaders that I really look up to in my life. They've had a huge impact on my life in general. And I've never told her this, but Pastor Diana, I remember like the first time really meeting her, and I've never told her this. I don't even think she remembers, but I remember that we were in the bathroom and she was like, oh, I'm so glad that you're here, this and this. And I'm like, oh, me too. Hey, right? And before she came in, I was probably TMI, but I was going to use the restroom. So I was opening the stalls. And I'm sure we all can relate to when we open a stall and the person before didn't flush. So we're like, oh, I'm not going to use that stall. And you just go on to the next one. And so I remember she had come in and we started talking, and then she went into that same stall. So she opened that same stall and saw that it was not flush or clogged. I think it was clogged. And I remember she started like flushing it. She was trying to like fix it. And I was like, and that was just so cool to me because and I know she doesn't remember it, but to me, I was like, oh, that's funny. I opened that stall and I didn't have that reaction. I just said, oop, like I'm not using that one and it's not my problem. And I moved on to the next one. But she opened it. And because she saw her place in that church as like, she had this heart position that was, if I don't do this, nobody's going to do this. And she just started like trying to fix it and trying to flush it. And I was like, that is a true leader to me. That's like the most important role that you can play in a company, a team, a community, an enterprise, is as an individual, treating the facility, treating your coworkers, treating your employees as if it's your company. These are your employees. This is your team. And that's how she was. And I always remembered that because I'm like, that's a leader. They look at something and they don't just say, oop, not my problem. They say, nope. Even though she's not the owner of the church, she still took it upon herself to treat that facility as if it was her own. I thought that was so cool. Shout out to Pastor Diana. She has a bunch of other leadership examples, but that was one that the first interaction I had with her, it really stuck with me, and that's something I'm never going to forget. And now that's something that I try to do in every team I find myself in. Another really cool leadership story, and hopefully this is something that the athletes find, or football fans find, really cool, is the story of the head coach of the 49ers, Bill Walsh, back in the 80s and 90s. So Bill Walsh was a coach who was, as I'm sure a lot of you guys can agree, way ahead of his time. What he started to do is when he started to train and coach his team, he would have a cameraman with him. This was in the 80s, keep in mind, 80s and 90s. For every single session, recording his coaching and recording his practices and trainings. And then he put them on VHS tapes, put them in a box, and gave them to every single one of his assistant coaches. And he said, learn from this. I want you to watch all of these. And this man had one of the best offensive teams on the West Coast. So what he was giving was very valuable. And he was teaching these assistant coaches, I want you to watch these, I want you to study these, and I want you to use these tips, and I want you to challenge them. If there's something that you think is wrong, come and talk to me about it. But this is the incredible, valuable thing that I'm giving you to learn from it. And the crazy thing is that a lot of these assistant coaches, later on, they left the team and they even became the head coaches for the rival teams. And a lot of times, these coaches that had trained under him beat his team and he had lost to them. But he was, in a way, so happy about that because he saw what he was doing as not just a benefit to himself, but this effort and time that I'm putting into creating these tapes is for the benefit of the game of football. He saw it in the bigger picture. He gave something so valuable away for free, and sometimes it was even used against him, and he still was happy and freely gave it because he saw the big picture. That is what a leader is. It's having this mentality of what can I give versus what can I get. And now Bill Walsh goes down as one of the best, most famous football coaches in all history, and now this man is in the Hall of Fame. That is a true impact that you can have on people's life. He didn't have a scarcity mindset. He freely gave, and that made his name go down in history and will stay in history long after he's gone. Bill Walsh knew how important it was to empower and freely give to his team. That's actually a teaching that we can also find in the Bible. In John 14:12, it says, "Truly I tell you, the one who believes in me will also do the works that I do, and he will do even greater works than these, because I am going to the Father. Jesus Christ taught his disciples all of this incredibly intelligent information because he knew that he wasn't always going to be there, and he saw the greater picture. Just like Bill Walsh, he knew, I'm not going to be a head coach forever. And that's the same thing of you and I. We don't have to be a leader. We get to be a leader. And we have this incredible opportunity to teach and freely give to others if we see the bigger picture, that wherever we are doing, whether you're in real estate, whether you're in physical therapy, whether you're in medicine, it's something bigger than us. And it's something that's going to be impactful and truly stay on this earth long after we're gone. That can also be found in John 20, verse 21. Jesus said, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, I also send you." Empower your people and give them enough knowledge and wisdom to use that to spread that positivity long after you're no longer on this earth. So in conclusion, I wanted to share these stories with you because if you want to be an excellent leader in whatever position you're in, you have to study other leaders and learn from them. You have to treat people as if they are going to be on your team forever. Give an encouraging word. Buy them their favorite Starbucks drink or snack. That's what Bill Walsh did. Even though he's a smart man, he knew these people are probably not going to be here forever. I'm going to still give them my 100%. Because that is what an excellent leader does. Treats everybody on your team, whether it's a janitor, whether it's a CFO, whether it's a coworker, whether it's your boss, as if you were going to be with them forever, not just for whatever season that you may find yourself in. Write things down, follow through with your word, yet let your yes mean yes and your no mean no. Respect and have value for your word. Serve others first before asking for something. And I want to make another shout out to Pastor Diana's husband, Pastor Cruz. Both of these two, they have their own family. They're very, very busy people. Pastor Diana even has a full-time job outside of the church. And even though they meet with us and sometimes they look super tired, they still show up with the best attitude. A lot of the times they even bring their little girls to church, which is not always the most convenient thing, as I'm sure a lot of parents can agree. But they invest time in their team. They invest time in the people they lead. And they build equity with us. And that's something that truly has an impact on me. I feel a sense of loyalty to them because of how much they've poured into me. And because even though they have very busy lives, they're not just at home looking for something to do. They have a whole family and kids to raise. They still pour into us day and night, giving us value with the belief that they are going to have a profound impact on our lives. And I promise you that they do. So always lead from that heart position that people are going to be on your team forever, and to serve others before asking for something yourself. And guess what? All this information is super cool to hear, but wisdom is applied knowledge. If you just retain this information and you don't actually do it, what's the value in that information? We have to actually do these practices in our lives in order to have an impact, not just know about them and think, oh, that sounds really cool. We have to actually do them. Last food for thought is to always think, I want to be the leader I wish I had. Maybe you didn't grow up in a very healthy household. Maybe you didn't grow up with God at the center at church. Maybe you didn't grow up in the best environment or ideals, and you didn't really have a good leader to look up to. Guess what? You can be that leader. You can be that leader for somebody. You don't have to be incredibly smart. You don't have to be incredibly perfect. Winston Churchill actually struggled a lot with his communication and delivery. So a lot of people would say that he would spend hours practicing his speeches and simplifying his jargon so that he could have a more impactful speech. So don't think that you have to be Jesus Christ in order to be a leader. It's going to take time. It's going to take effort. And exactly where you are, exactly who you are right now, you can be a leader in whatever position you find yourself in. It doesn't matter what your job title is. Last thought. When Winston Churchill eventually became Prime Minister in 1940 during World War II, he wrote, "All my past life had been a preparation for this hour and for this trial." He found a way to bounce back from his mistakes in order to be impactful. He found solutions. He didn't just point out the problem and say, oh, the problem was this and this. He found the solution, he had the wisdom, and he applied that knowledge in order to be impactful, ultimately leading him to win the war for the Allies. So what will your impact be? Today, this hour, this place, wherever you are, you can make an impact. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.